We take a bunch of underutilized computing resources from all around the globe, and we put them onto a single network. And this allows all kinds of benefits for consumers. It allows access to virtually unlimited computing power, the ability to scale effortlessly, improve performance, censorship resistance, and once again, much, much cheaper costs. In fact, DPINs can be up to 10 times cheaper. And just imagine that for a second. A service that's 10 times better, faster, and cheaper than anything else out there, disrupting a multi-trillion-dollar market. And I think that's what we're trying to build at IONET.
Welcome to Fully Diluted. Today we're joined by Tory Green, co-founder and CEO of IO.net, a GPU compute DPIN that's been making waves in the space over the last year or so. We'll just get started asking Tory, what is IO.net and what's the story behind the protocol's founding?
Sure. Before I go into that, though, I'd love to say huge fan of Messari. I've been an enterprise subscriber for many years now, and I love you guys' reports. Dylan and I especially loved your DPIN report. I don't know if you saw, I just referenced it in the tweet, but big fan, very happy with the podcast.
Thank you.
So what is IONET? I think the easiest way to describe IONET is we're an Airbnb for cloud compute. And I think you hear a lot of people say that, but it really is true. Just like Airbnb disrupted hotels, I think that decentralized compute networks have the potential to disrupt the $2.5 trillion cloud computing industry. And that's really why I started IONET. And, let me tell you that story. Before IONET, I was on a traditional path. So I did banking, corporate strategy, private equity, VC, and had a bunch of executive roles at Web2 companies. In 2016, found crypto, and like many of us, totally fell in love with the technology and its potential to change the world. Dove in, buying tokens, NFTs, yield farming, getting rugged a few times, and really just, did everything there was to do. But the main concern that I had about crypto was I felt like most protocols were effectively solutions looking for problems. That is, they weren't really creating real economic value. This all changed in 2019 when I became the COO of a machine learning fintech. And it was really there that I witnessed firsthand that the stranglehold that big tech had on AI. Companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, they monopolize the entire value chain from compute to data to models. And they were effectively acting as the gatekeepers. They were restricting access to equipment. They were locking people into long contracts. And most importantly, they were charging just insane amounts for compute. And I remember reading at the time, Andreessen came out with a report that said like the average startup was spending 80% of the capital it raised on AI compute. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Like there's no way that this industry can survive like this. But initially, I was hesitant to do anything about it. I actually remember thinking, why rock the boat? I have a good career. And like, who am I to beat Amazon? But that's when I had a realization that became an obsession, that decentralized networks were not only a solution to this problem, but they may be the only solution. And that was really the point of no return for me. It was a once in a generation opportunity to solve a hair on fire problem in a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And quit my job, and that's what led to IONET.
Very cool. Yeah, it'd be great if you could give more of a high-level overview of the problems compute faces, why you settled on the solution you did with IO.net, and the direction you're going in.
Sure. I think there's a lot of different problems compute faces, a lot of different problems that IONET solves, but the biggest one in my mind is the shortage of compute. And to understand this problem, you really have to know a little bit about the history of the cloud. In the beginning, most people got their compute from one of three providers: Amazon, Google, Microsoft. But then AI came on the scene and everything changed. AI is just ravenous. The processing power required for machine and deep learning applications is doubling every 3.4 months. So that's 10x every 18 months and 100x every 3 years. And the problem is that these big cloud providers just can't keep up with this. They don't have enough GPUs. Building new data centers is slow and costly. And ultimately, this is impacting consumers. They're experiencing long wait times, fewer choices, and really, really high costs. And that's why I think decentralized networks are so great, because they can solve this problem. I referenced this Airbnb of GPUs idea, but basically that's how it works. Like Airbnb, we take a bunch of underutilized computing resources from all around the globe, and we put them onto a single network. And this allows all kinds of benefits for consumers. It allows access to virtually unlimited computing power, the ability to scale effortlessly, improve performance, censorship resistance, and once again, much, much cheaper costs. In fact, DPINs can be up to 10 times cheaper. And just imagine that for a second. A service that's 10 times better, faster, and cheaper than anything else out there, disrupting a multi-trillion-dollar market. And I think that's what we're trying to build at IONET.
Why do you think it is that Deepin can reduce costs by a factor of 10?
It's really just supply and demand. You have all of these underutilized resources around the world. You've got thousands of independent data centers operating at 12 to 18% capacity. You've got millions of consumer devices like PCs, laptops, gaming consoles that are barely using a fraction of their potential. And so when you expand the supply from what is relatively small right now, which is, the hyperscalers owning a few data centers, once you expand the supply, it's going to drive the cost down. That's really just Econ 101. And, like we like to say, it's effectively structural arbitrage.
Gotcha. What do you think it is about Deepin versus leveraging these latent GPUs using a centralized marketplace or platform and connecting in the same way? What advantage does Deepin have there?
So I mentioned the cost. That's obviously a big one. But there's plenty of other advantages. There's the ability to scale. As I mentioned, the traditional cloud computing companies are physically constrained by the number of GPUs they own and the size of their data centers. So that's pretty much, if they need more scale, they've got to build more data centers and buy more GPUs. But a network like IONET, we can just branch out into those millions of underutilized GPUs. So that makes it much, much more scalable. Second, there's obviously censorship resistance, which is it's sort of a natural feature of DPINs because there's no centralized entity controlling the flow of information. There's also improved performance. And actually, this was something that surprised me. But we found that because of the broad distribution of our nodes, we were able to act as a de facto CDN, and we could significantly reduce latency for a lot of our clients. And this is especially true in inferencing. And then sort of the fourth is access to nearly unlimited compute. And this really ties into the second one we talked about, which is, once again, centralized cloud companies are physically constrained, DPINs are not. And it's actually the last one that I'm most excited about because, as I mentioned, there's already millions of unutilized devices right now, but I think there soon could be billions. And this is an area a lot of people call dark compute. So this is devices like mobile phones, smart TVs, smart cars, smart refrigerators, basically everything smart. They're all virtually untapped and may soon be available for use. And I like to just imagine that. The mobile phone in your hand, the smart car next to you on the road, all being utilized to build the next generation of the cloud. And that's why I think DPINs are so much better than traditional cloud providers.
We're seeing a lot of investment in data centers. I think OpenAI recently announced a $500 billion investment. I think Sam Altman's called for over $7 trillion investment to expand AI capacity and compute. Do you see that driving the cost over time and becoming more competitive with a DPIN model like IO.net, or is that not really a problem in the foreseeable future?
So that's a great question. A lot of investors ask me that. The short answer is there may be some effects, but I don't see the shortage ending anytime soon. And it's true, people are doing a lot to alleviate it. You've got the foundries that are scaling capacity. You've got NVIDIA's ramping up production runs. The cloud providers, the hyperscalers are stockpiling GPUs. And as you mentioned, people are building a lot of data centers. But there's really two underlying factors that I think will cause the shortage to persist, and that's supply and demand. First, as I mentioned, the demand for GPUs is like anything. It's like nothing we've ever seen, growing at 100 times every 3 years. And that's just for AI. And AI isn't the only use case. GPUs are also used in rendering, gaming, zero knowledge, the metaverse. These could all be huge, and it's only going to put worse pressure. And I'm reminded of a quote by Chris Dixon where he said that for every important computing resource in history, demand has outpaced supply. And I don't think GPUs are going to be any different. Now, on the other side of this coin, you have the supply chain. And the supply chain for GPUs is actually much more complicated and much more fragile than people think. First, you've got raw materials. So 70% of this market dominated by China. So any trade disruptions or mining disruptions in the region could choke off the supply at the source. Second, you've got the chip manufacturing and assembly. So chips are made by companies like Samsung and TSMC, and foundry capacity is pretty much maxed out for that right now. And then assembly, the circuit boards, the cooling systems, enclosures is done by companies like ASUS and MSI. And that's vulnerable to labor shortages, energy crises, factory shutdowns, all the things that we saw in COVID. Third, you've got shipping. I mean, once the GPUs are made, you got to get through the gauntlet of distribution. That's shipping, warehousing, retail, and things like port congestion, fuel price spikes, energy, or extreme weather can throw a wrench into that. Scalpers and gray markets make this problem worse. And then finally, as you mentioned, yes, people are trying to build data centers, but it's really much easier said than done. You need land, permitting, massive energy requirements. And so when you step back and you look at the extreme demand coupled with a very fragile supply chain, I don't think we're going to see massive shortages ending anytime soon.
Makes sense. What specific use cases are you seeing the most demand for IO.NET GPUs at the moment?
So we actually offer everything. You can go on IONET and you can use it for training, you can use it for fine tuning, and you can use it for inferencing. That said, the number one use of the platform right now is definitely inferencing. But I don't think that's an IONET thing. That's just, 80 to 90% of all transactions in AI are inferencing. You only build a model once, but you run it sort of an infinite number of times. It's almost like AI's equivalent of Gillette's razor and blade model. From a customer standpoint, a lot of AI, we're seeing people use it for audio generation, video generation, AI agents. But there's also a lot of other use cases that people are starting to use it for. Crypto validation, robotics. I think at the end of the day, what we're really focused on IONET is just providing the most affordable compute for anyone, anywhere in the world at any time.
Makes sense. In terms of maintaining uptime, making sure that users have consistent access to GPUs, how do you ensure that in a decentralized model?
That's a great question. And it's actually one of the things that we focus on most is just super, super important. And there's a couple different ways that we ensure this. The first is our proof of work system. So what this is basically any new GPU that comes onto the network is tested to ensure that it meets our very high performance and reliability standards. Second is orchestration. We use a variety of orchestration tools like Kubernetes, Ray, Secure Mesh VPN to dynamically balance our workloads. And what this means in layperson's terms is if a node goes off, our system pretty quickly identifies it and turns on a new one. And then finally, there's incentives and rewards. Suppliers earn IO for supplying GPUs, and they earn even more IO if they're supplying better GPUs and maintaining consistent uptime. And so it's really the combination of these three factors that allow us to have a very reliable network despite being decentralized and thousands of nodes across the globe.
Yeah, on the IO token, obviously tokens are at the center of DePIN and crypto. How have you thought about designing the IO token incentives more broadly? And could you give more of a clear explanation of what IO's role is in IO.NET?
Sure. So IO has a couple different use cases. First and foremost, it's a utility token. So it's used to pay transaction fees on the network. And it's also used to reward contributors. And that can be anything from people supplying GPUs to someone finding bugs on our platform. Second, it's used for staking. And staking is just hyper critical to secure the network. And then finally, I've talked a lot about progressive decentralization in the past. And I could definitely see a world where IO becomes a governance token and can be used for token holders to vote on major issues affecting the future of the network.
Gotcha. Could you go a bit more about, I think you mentioned staking for the IO.NET token. How do users do that, and what's kind of the direct reward for staking?
Sure. So staking is, once again, vital for the security of the network. And we have thousands of users staking millions of dollars in value right now. And there's a couple different ways that staking is used. First and foremost, every supplier needs to stake. And this kind of gives us like a carrot and stick approach. If suppliers don't perform well, or worse, they behave maliciously, we can slash the stake. We can slash part of it. We can slash all of it. If the suppliers do perform well, if they maintain consistent uptime, if they bring good equipment on the network, they're going to receive real financial rewards. And this dual approach, it's not that different from what you would see for like Ethereum validators or Bitcoin miners. It works really, really well to make our network very, very secure.
Makes sense. IO.net's also built on Solana as, I guess, the foundational L1. What led you to that choice? And obviously, we're seeing most deepins build on Solana. Yeah, what are the core advantages of Solana?
So IONET does thousands of transactions a day. And so we needed a network that's fast, affordable, and reliable. And that's one of the main reasons we went with Solana. It does tens of thousands of transactions per second. It's low latency, makes quick confirmations easy. And this is pretty important for us because it's vital for tasks like real-time AI inference. And of course, it's low fees, keep costs on our network down, which is especially important when you're running lots of small transactions. But I think another big reason that we went with Solana is because of the community. It really has one of the best ecosystems, developers, investors, protocols, supporters. And so we can tap into this ecosystem. We can attract builders to build on IONET. We can grow our user base. We can integrate with other DApps in the Solana ecosystem and ultimately just use it to foster innovation on that.
Yeah, on that ecosystem, where's IO.net either partnered or collaborated with other deepins or protocols, and where do you see the most opportunity there in the near future?
So actually, the area I see the most opportunity in is not in deepin, it's in AI agents. And I'm not necessarily talking about the agents that are on the market today. Don't get me wrong. I think those are very, very cool, but they're really just the tip of the iceberg. And that's because most agents today are effectively living in the digital. They're serving as virtual assistants, chatbots, trading platforms. In the future, I think we're going to start to see agents really permeate the rest of the economy, so the real world. And I'll give you a few examples of this. One is agriculture. Imagine a world where we have smart farms that are using remote sensors to monitor climate and synchronized water and fertilizer use. They could even direct robots to plant, nurture, and harvest crops. Transportation and logistics. Imagine fleets of autonomous vehicles connecting to smart warehouses, using sensors to track inventory, employing telematics to coordinate delivery times and optimize routes. Healthcare. I think that AI doctors are going to become commonplace, and they're going to be monitoring a 24/7 stream of patient data from wearables and then cross-referencing this against a global medical database. I think there's some really crazy stuff on the horizon. And the really cool thing is, unlike previous industrial revolutions, this intelligent machine economy is going to be largely self-governing. Researchers estimate that there could be hundreds of billions to trillions of connected devices. That's just mind-blowing. A trillion connected devices. That's 150 times greater than the global population today. And just imagine what kind of economic growth that could cause. I think it's in the trillions, or it could be in the quadrillions. Who knows? One thing I am pretty confident about is that I think that decentralized compute networks will really benefit from this because we offer the infrastructure that allows these agents to flourish.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think you kind of touched on physical AI. I think actually we're seeing a lot of deepins starting to go into that direction, more starting on the data collection side. Like you mentioned, agriculture is a prime use case.
Pretty much unlimited. I've been so bullish on deepin for such a long time. I mean, to me, I've spent a lot of my life as an investor, and so I'm a sucker for picks and shovels plays. And deepin is the ultimate. Like I think that's what crypto is made.
Yeah, makes sense. Could you go a bit more in like this physical AI world? Are these agents, are they trained? They're trained the same way as the digital AI agents that we're seeing emerge now. Is there going to be a greater need for compute just because they are in the real world, or is there similar laws?
I don't think the fact that they're in the real world is going to mean there's a greater need for compute when it comes to training. But I do think that there will just be a greater need for compute for training each subsequent generation of models. Because if you look at, put yourself in the shoes of someone who's building an AI app, right? How do you win? Why do people buy your app? They buy your app because it's smarter than all the other apps. And with AI, there's really only one way to do that. That's to do more intensive training on more parameters. years. And obviously that requires more compute. And so I think that just in general, these models will continue to grow more and more and more complex over time. Is it more difficult to train a smart sensor than it is an LLM doing something else? I don't know. But I do know that things will get more complex over time. And then the other thing, I think the thing that really will impact the market is, once again, 80% of the market is always going to be inference. And so when you go from millions of agents to billions to hundreds of billions, inferencing market is just going to go through the roof. And so sort of tying back to what I said earlier, the sheer amount of demand here, people can just not fathom because it's never happened before.
Yeah. Do you think the decentralized agents we're seeing emerge right now have a greater reliance on decentralized compute from platforms like IO.net, or is it they can kind of get it from anywhere? Like, does decentralized AI need decentralized compute?
It's their choice. One of the things that I think people saw, this reminds me of the NFT boom, and people kind of figured out that NFTs were centralized, right? Like your Bored Ape or your Pudgy Penguin is being hosted on an AWS server somewhere. And so it's really not yours because they could just cut that off. There was some pushback there. It didn't really impact the market too much. I think right now there's this novelty in agents where people are like, hey, this is awesome. I don't know how much they care right now, but I think as this grows and people really start to understand, all right, these need to be decentralized, and all the things that come with decentralization, like censorship resistance, that unless you are on a decentralized infrastructure, you are not decentralized. But the cool thing is a lot of these companies see this. So we're partnered with Cerebro, AI16Z. A lot of them are already moving in this direction.
Awesome. What are the major milestones for IO.net over the next year? And of what you're sharing of us, what are you most excited about?
Sure. I think if we want to explore the roadmap for 2025, we really have to step back and look at what our long-term goals are. And this is something I've actually talked quite a bit about in our State of the Network address. But to put it simply, IONET's long-term goal is to disrupt Amazon and capture a huge share of the multi-trillion-dollar cloud and AI market. And I know a lot of people laugh when they hear this. After all, how can a small Web3 startup take on Amazon? Well, I'll tell you exactly how we're planning to do it. So first, I think you have to understand one of the reasons that the hyperscalers like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are so successful is that they have a really broad scope of offering. They don't just offer compute, they offer everything a developer needs. So storage, networking, databases, AI ML tools, all in a single platform. And this makes it extremely convenient for customers. And it's part of the reason why you've seen projects like Microsoft Teams take over Slack. Unfortunately, most decentralized compute networks today do not offer this. And that creates a pretty big competitive disadvantage. And so I think the solution is simple. If we're going to beat Amazon, we have to recreate their offerings, of course, at a much lower cost. And that's what we're building. And I'll give you sort of a sneak peek into some of the high level areas of our roadmap. First, we're going to continue to expand our compute arsenal, continue to build a wide variety of GPUs at the lowest prices in the industry. We're going to continue to build our distributed computing muscle. Right now, we offer support for Kubernetes, Ray, Slurm. We're going to continue to add more distributed computing frameworks. Third, we're going to continue to bolster the technology. Our tech team is amazing. It's run by our CTO, Gaurav, and he's been achieving 95% stability on these clusters and an average cluster creation time of 1 minute and 30 seconds, which is just insane. You can't find that anywhere else. But we're going to keep improving. We're going to keep getting better. We're going to keep lowering latency. We're going to keep bolstering security. Fourth, as I mentioned, we're going to recreate a lot of the offerings that the AWS's, GCPs, and Azures have. The storage, the networking, the AI ML tool. And we're also going to build a few things that they don't have. A decentralized model marketplace, maybe even a decentralized data marketplace. And I think this all feeds into the last thing that we're going to do. And really, when I explain the last thing, I need to say how I envision IONET. I want IONET to be a one-stop shop for anyone who wants to build a decentralized AI app. Basically, soup to nuts, you can come in, you can get your data, you can get your models, you can get your compute, and then you can build on our network. And so we're going to be providing all of the different tools and SDKs for developers to do that. Now, I don't think we're going to have all of these done in 2025, but I do think if we can execute on these, we do have a serious chance of disrupting AWS and capturing a huge share of that market. Because just imagine for a second, a service that offers everything that AWS, GCP, and Azure offer at 1/10 the cost. It's going to be unstoppable.
Yeah, I think in our research, primary bottleneck of Deepin on the digital side is basically AWS's GCP's, consolidated services, all the features, the integrated platforms that they offer. So I think if you guys can build that, that'd be amazing.
Well, and one of the things we're doing is we're just poaching people from there like crazy. I think we recently got someone from NVIDIA, AMD. We got people from Amazon. Like a lot of these guys don't, and gals, of course, they want to change the future. They see that Web 2 is dying. And so they want to get there and they want to do something new and something exciting.
Makes sense. Yeah, for listeners, where would you direct them to learn more about IO, either social media or other channels?
So there's a lot of different places. I think the best thing to do is check out our Twitter. We post there a lot. I post a lot on IO, obviously. Join our Discord. You can get in touch with the community. We've got a fantastic community. I think it's over like 20 different languages. Try the network. It's funny. I had an investor call a long time ago, and I gave this long pitch. And at the end of it, I gave a demo. And they were like, dude, you should have given that from the beginning because it shows exactly what you do. So go on, spin up a cluster, 30 seconds or a minute and 30 seconds. And then go try to get a cluster anywhere else. It can't be done. But I think, check out the socials, go on the website, play around. And I think that's the best way to learn about it.
Gotcha. And then looking at Deepin more broadly, what are you most excited about in the space going into 2025?
I think it's really this concept of decentralized AI. And that's not just IONET, right? You've got AI has multiple different areas to it. You've got compute, you've got data, you've got models, you've got agents. We are obviously building the compute. We are also planning on getting into models, maybe data long term, but there are so many cool startups that are doing things with data, so many DeepIns. And it's funny because, almost every DeepIn can be a data play, like even things that you don't think about, like a step in or something, right? Yeah. Like that's getting some kind of data helium. And so I just think, there's so many areas of DeepIn. Obviously I'm biased that I choose AI because that's where I spend all my time focusing. But I think just across the board, you guys have that slide that shows the market penetration. It's like 1/1000 every major market. So I think across the board, we could see so much.
Awesome. Yeah. Exciting things ahead. Yeah. It was so great having you on. I guess I'll give you the opportunity. If there's a question that you want us to ask you, feel free.
Oh, I think there was one about the progress that maybe we can blend in earlier in the interview.
Got you. Let me ask you that.
Sure.
We'll edit that in. What progress has IO.net made so far? And where are you guys at in your timeline?
Oh, man. So it's been a crazy 18 months at IONET. We're still a pretty young company. We've done so much in the past year. In fact, I don't think that any of the senior management team I don't think anyone's taken a vacation, maybe a day off here or there. But some of the things we've done, I think I can think of a few. We built the world's first technology capable of creating decentralized clusters, build a network of over 300,000 verified GPUs and between, let's say, 5 to 10,000 cluster-ready GPUs at all times. This network's across 130 countries right now. We've increased our annualized total net earnings from 4 million to over 30 million. We're doing about 60,000 a day now. We've signed over 80 partnerships with both Web 2 and Web 3 partners. Kria, Leonardo, GaiaNet, Injective, Mira, Cerebro, AI16Z. We've built a lot of cool products. You can check out the website, see them on there. We've served over 5 million hours of compute. And as I previously mentioned, 95% cluster stability and a minute and 30 cluster creation. We've partnered with a lot of other players in the network who are now suppliers like Aether, Render, Filecoin. We raised 40 million from top tier investors, and our foundation got a token launched on both Coinbase and Binance. So crazy year. And the funny thing is, we're not stopping down because I think that 2025 and 2026 could bring even more for IO.
Awesome.